Ever been pushed to the edge by an overbearing HOA? This video dives into outrageous real-life battles where property rights, neighbor disputes, and unjust fines spark a fight back against the tyranny of community overreach. Welcome to our channel. If you're tired of witnessing your rights being trampled and believe in standing up for what's right, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button to support us as we share these incredible stories of defiance and victory. Moving to a quiet area where the rules were meant to be few and far between was my fresh start. A place where peace, privacy, and freedom were supposed to reign. I thought I'd finally escaped the city's chaos, envisioning a life defined by open skies and personal space. But my dream turned sour the day I decided enough was enough. It all started with a strip of land leading from my property to one of the main roads in our HOA neighborhood. It wasn't much, just a cleared, unpaved road that I inherited along with my new home, but to me, was mine. Over time, I began noticing tire tracks across that strip, a hint that my neighbors were using it as their shortcut back home. At first, I shrugged it off. After all, the previous owner had let it be, and it had always been there. I never imagined that one day, this quiet road would become the battleground for my rights. About a month after moving in, the situation escalated. I woke up one Saturday morning to the sound of relentless honking. Peering out my window, I saw a car idling right by my gate, the driver blaring her horn as if summoning an army. Within minutes, a frustrated woman, whom I'd soon come to know as Karen, parked her car by my gate. Her eyes were blazing, and her body language screamed authority as she jumped out and marched toward me. I stepped outside cautiously, keeping a safe distance. "Karen, what's going on?" I asked, trying to mask the irritation in my voice. With a scowl that seemed permanently etched on her face, she snapped, "I need you to open this gate right now. You're blocking the public road, and I can't use it to get back to my home. This isn't negotiable." I crossed my arms and replied calmly, "This is my property, Karen. I installed the fence and gate to protect my land and stop unauthorized use. I'm not going to let you or anyone else treat my driveway like a free-for-all." Karen's eyes narrowed, and she gestured sharply toward the gate. "You don't understand, do you? This road is supposed to be for everyone in our community. The HOA rules state that if you block it, you're in violation. I'm not just talking. I'm calling the police if you don't comply." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious? You're going to call the cops over a gate?" "I've checked the property records. This strip of land is clearly part of my property, not a public road. I'm within my rights." Before I could say another word, I saw the glint of a police car's headlights approaching. My heart pounded as two officers got out, one heading over to Karen and the other coming toward me. The officer near me had a friendly, reassuring manner as he began to ask questions. "Sir, can you explain what's happening here?" I took a deep breath and replied, "I set up a fence, gate, and proper signage to prevent unauthorized use of my property. I reached out to the HOA about it, but they said there's nothing they can do since my property isn't under their jurisdiction." Karen, however, insists that this is a public road and has even called 911. Karen, her face now flushed with anger, interjected, "This is a community road, and you're selfishly blocking it." Officer Miller looked at me kindly. "Sir, do you have any documentation regarding your property lines?" I nodded and led him inside to retrieve the zoning maps provided by the fence builders. They clearly showed that the strip in question was indeed part of my lot. After a thorough review, Officer Miller confirmed, "It appears your property is correctly marked. I'm afraid there's nothing we can do here regarding your rights as a homeowner." Karen's protests died in the air as the officers reassured me and made a note to follow up with the HOA. The police left, and I was left standing by my gate, heart racing from the confrontation. Karen stormed back to her car, muttering about blocking a public road and community standards. Later that day, I discovered that the HOA had issued a formal ordinance clarifying that my property was off-limits to the neighborhood shortcut, and to my surprise, they had also suspended Karen from the board for her overzealous behavior. That evening, as I reviewed the security footage of Karen's meltdown and her frantic phone call to the authorities, I felt a mix of vindication and resolve. I knew this was just the beginning of a larger battle against those who abuse their power. My property, my sanctuary, was under attack, but I was ready to defend it. The confrontation at my gate was just the beginning. After that fateful morning, whispers about property rights and overreaching authority rippled through the neighborhood. I could feel eyes watching as I went about my day, and even more unsettling were the murmurs among my neighbors. Some supported Karen's claims about community standards, while others sympathized with my struggle to maintain my private property. That afternoon, I received a call from Linda, a friendly neighbor who had quietly expressed her support earlier. "Hey, I heard about what happened at your gate," she said, her tone warm but concerned. "I'm really sorry you had to go through that. We need to talk. There's more people who feel the same way." I agreed to meet her at a local coffee shop near my property. Over steaming cups of coffee, Linda confided, "I've seen others get pushed around by Karen. I've heard stories of residents being told they can't even walk on a sidewalk if it's not approved. It's like she's turned every inch of this neighborhood into her personal rule book." I sighed, rubbing my tired eyes. I never imagined that setting up a simple fence would turn into such a battle. But when someone tries to take away my right to secure my own home, I can't just sit back. Linda leaned forward. "I'm tired of seeing our community divided. Some folks quietly accept Karen's bullying, but I think it's time we all stand together. Your stand today could spark a change. If more people join you, we might force the HOA to rethink these ridiculous rules." Inspired by our conversation, I decided to document every incident meticulously. I reviewed the footage from my security cameras and compiled detailed notes of every encounter. In the coming days, more residents approached me, sharing similar experiences. A neighbor's car repeatedly scraping the fence, another complaining about unauthorized shortcuts, and even someone mentioning fines for minor infractions. The common thread was clear. Karen was enforcing rules far beyond her jurisdiction, and it was tearing the community apart. Late one evening, as I sat on my porch reviewing the evidence, I heard footsteps approaching. It was Derek, another resident who had a reputation for being outspoken. "Hey man," he said, settling into the chair next to me. "I just got off the phone with a couple of neighbors. They're fed up with Karen's antics. It's not just your fence, it's every corner of this neighborhood that she's trying to control." Derek continued, "I'm thinking we should organize a community meeting. If we all get together and show that we're not going to be intimidated, maybe the HOA board will finally listen to us. We deserve to have our voices heard." I nodded, the idea resonating deeply with me. I agree. The more we share our stories, the harder it will be for them to ignore the truth. I've got all the footage, the documents, and the records of every incident. We can present this to the board and demand they take action. Over the next few days, I received messages and phone calls from several residents. One neighbor, Maria, recounted, "I've always felt that something was off. Karen told me I couldn't even plant my garden along the sidewalk because it wasn't aesthetically pleasing. I'm sick of it." Another, a quiet man named Thomas, admitted, "I've been driving through my own street for years without any problems until now. It's like we're being treated like criminals in our own homes." The community was clearly awakening. On a crisp Saturday morning, a small but determined group of residents gathered outside my property. They came armed with water bottles, notepads, and an unwavering desire for justice. Linda, Derek, Maria, Thomas, and several others formed a loose circle as we discussed our next steps. "We need to put pressure on the HOA," Linda declared. "Let's compile our stories, document every violation, and, if necessary, take legal action. We have a right to live without being bullied by someone who's overstepping her bounds." Derek added, "I've already reached out to a couple of attorneys who specialize in property rights. They're interested in our case, but we need to show them that this isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern of abuse." I felt a surge of determination. "All right, here's what we're going to do. I'll continue to document everything. We'll schedule a community meeting right here, where everyone can share their experiences. Once we have enough voices, we'll present our case to the HOA board. It's time we take a stand together." As the morning light broke over the neighborhood, the group dispersed with a renewed sense of purpose. I watched them leave, knowing that our small act of defiance had ignited a larger movement. The battle wasn't just about my driveway or a stubborn fence. It was about reclaiming our community from those who abused their power. That evening, as I reviewed the day's events, I couldn't help but feel hopeful. The community was waking up, and together, we were going to force a change that would redefine our neighborhood for the better. The day of the community meeting arrived, and a tangible energy filled the air. Early that Saturday morning, flyers and word of mouth had spread throughout the neighborhood that something big was about to happen. Residents were finally going to come together and demand accountability from the HOA. I spent the early hours setting up chairs in the community hall, checking that my recordings and documents were ready to be shared. I could feel the weight of our collective frustration in every nervous heartbeat. By late afternoon, the hall buzzed with the murmur of dozens of residents, neighbors who had long suffered in silence, now eager to speak out. As people filed in, I exchanged determined nods with Linda, Derek, and Maria, all of whom had become leaders in our grassroots movement. The room was a mosaic of faces, some anxious, others resolute, united by one common cause: to put an end to Karen's oppressive enforcement and the HOA's overreach. When the clock struck 7, I stepped up to the podium. My voice was steady, even as the pressure of representing the community bore down on me. "Thank you everyone for coming," I began. "We're here because our voices have been ignored for too long. My property dispute isn't an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a larger problem in our neighborhood." I paused, scanning the room to meet the eyes of those who share my frustration. We all deserve the right to control our own properties without intimidation. A ripple of agreement passed through the crowd. Then, Maria stood up, her voice quivering with both passion and a trace of vulnerability. "I've been told that even planting a garden on my sidewalk is against the rules," she said. "I never thought my personal choices would be questioned, but here we are. This isn't about rules. It's about respect and our freedom to live our lives." A murmur of applause followed her words. Derek then took the floor, his tone measured but forceful. "I've reached out to attorneys who specialize in property rights. They told me that what Karen and the HOA are doing is not only overreaching, they're violating actual laws. It's time we show them that we're not going to tolerate this abuse of power." At that moment, a former HOA board member, Thomas, who had long felt sidelined, added, "For years, I've watched this neighborhood crumble under unnecessary fines and arbitrary rules. We need to demand transparency and fairness from the HOA. Our community should be a place of collaboration, not coercion." The room filled with nods and quiet murmurs of approval. I then played a short video clip from my security footage, one that captured Karen's explosive outburst at my gate and the subsequent police visit. As the clip ended, silence reigned for a heartbeat before a wave of determined clapping swept across the hall. "Enough is enough," I declared. "We must stand together. It's not just about a gate or a driveway. It's about our right to live freely and with dignity. The HOA is supposed to serve us, not bully us into submission." Questions and concerns began to fly as the meeting opened into a lively discussion. Linda raised her hand and asked, "What's our next step? How do we ensure that our voices lead to real change?" I replied, "First, we compile every piece of evidence, the photos, the videos, the records of every incident. Then we present this unified case to the HOA board. If necessary, we will take legal action. But our strength lies in our unity. We need to make it clear that when the community speaks, they cannot be silenced." The discussion continued late into the evening, with neighbors volunteering to coordinate efforts and share their stories. Plans were made to start a petition, and several residents offered to speak at the next HOA meeting to demand reform. Even those who had been initially skeptical about challenging the HOA joined in, their voices growing louder as they realized they were not alone. As the meeting wrapped up, the atmosphere was transformed. What began as individual grievances had coalesced into a powerful collective determination. People left the hall with renewed purpose, their faces alight with hope and the promise of change. I could see in every departing resident the spirit of defiance, a belief that our united stand could and would reshape the future of our neighborhood. That night, I sat on my porch, reflecting on the day's events. The community had finally found its voice, and as I reviewed the meeting notes and the passionate conversations we'd shared, I knew that we had reached a turning point. The battle for our rights was far from over, but now we were not just fighting alone. We were a united front, ready to take on the tyranny of unchecked power. In the days following our explosive community meeting, the energy in the neighborhood was electric, but so was the tension. The unified outcry had rattled the very foundations of the HOA, and Karen's reaction was swift and vengeful. As reports of unauthorized actions by the HOA trickled in, it became clear that the battle was far from over. It started with subtle acts of retaliation. A few days after the meeting, I noticed that the no trespassing signs I had painstakingly put up were defaced with crude graffiti. At first, I assumed it was the work of some random vandals. But when a neighbor, who'd always been on our side, confided that she had seen Karen's car idling near my property late at night, the sinister picture became apparent. Karen was determined not to let our unity go unpunished. Late one evening, as I reviewed footage from my security cameras, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A dark silhouette, unmistakably Karen, creeping along the fence line with a set of tools. The camera caught her tampering with a section of the gate. Furious and alarmed, I immediately sent the video to my lawyer and the local police. It wasn't just a matter of property rights now. It was personal sabotage. The following morning, as I met up with Derek and Linda to discuss our next move, the atmosphere was charged with urgency. "We can't let this escalate any further," Linda declared, her voice quivering with a mix of fear and determination. Karen's actions are not just about a gate or a fence. They're an attack on our right to live without intimidation. Derek nodded in agreement, adding, "We need to be proactive." I've already talked to a few attorneys who say that this behavior could land her in serious legal trouble. We decided that our next community meeting would not only serve as a platform to share more stories, but also to coordinate a concrete plan of action. Over the following days, I made sure to document every instance of vandalism or unauthorized entry. I even began a shared online folder where residents could upload photos, videos, and notes detailing any interaction with the HOA or Karen's cohorts. One sunny afternoon, as I was reinforcing my gate with extra locks, a group of neighbors gathered, drawn by the murmurs of escalating conflict. Among them was Thomas, a former HOA board member whose once muted voice had now grown firm and authoritative. "We have proof," he announced to the small crowd, "that Karen is overstepping her bounds. The legal documents are in order, and our case is getting stronger by the day. We can't let her intimidate us any longer." The momentum was palpable. A neighbor named Maria, who had suffered her own share of HOA injustices, ranging from absurd fines to invasive inspections, stepped forward. "I'm tired of living in fear. I want to see the day when our neighborhood stands up and says, 'No more.'" Her words resonated with everyone present. That evening, as dusk settled, the community rallied for a peaceful protest. We planned to march from our homes to the HOA office, carrying banners and placards with messages like "Our property, our rights," and "Stop bullying, start listening." The protest was not just a demonstration. It was a declaration of independence from arbitrary control. As we marched, the streets vibrated with chants and determined footsteps. I led the procession, my heart pounding with both apprehension and resolve. At the front, I clutched my camera, determined to document every moment. We reached the imposing glass facade of the HOA headquarters, where Karen and a few remaining board members stood, visibly unsettled by the sheer number of residents demanding change. Karen's face hardened as she tried to regain control, but her voice was drowned out by the collective chant of our unified call for justice. "No more tyranny," echoed through the air. Amid the crowd, I caught a glimpse of Karen's eyes, darting nervously as she surveyed the sea of resolute faces. It was a moment of raw vulnerability, a glimpse that even those who abuse power can be shaken when confronted by the truth. After the march, the community dispersed with renewed determination. We knew that this protest was just one step in our larger battle, but it was a critical one. We had sent a clear message that the days of unchallenged power were numbered, and that when united, ordinary residents could stand up to authority. As I returned home that night, reviewing the day's footage, I felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The battle for our rights was escalating, but so was our resolve. With every act of defiance, every piece of evidence collected, and every voice raised in protest, we were carving a path toward a neighborhood where fairness and freedom prevailed. The tension that had been building over weeks finally culminated in a confrontation that no one in our neighborhood would ever forget. Early one crisp morning, our united front gathered at the edge of the HOA headquarters, a sleek, glass building that had long symbolized unchecked authority. The protest, carefully organized and fueled by our collective defiance, was about to deliver the final blow to a regime of arbitrary rules and abusive power. I stood at the front of the crowd, my heart pounding with both apprehension and determination. In my hand, my camera recorded every moment. The sea of resolute faces, the banners boldly proclaiming our property, our rights, and stop bullying, start listening, and the palpable energy that charged the air. Neighbors I'd never spoken with before now stood shoulder to shoulder with longtime friends, all united by a single purpose: to reclaim our community from tyranny. At the center of the commotion, Karen appeared, her once unwavering authority visibly shaken by the overwhelming force of the people. As she stepped forward onto the steps of the building, she attempted to regain control with a strained smile. "This isn't how we do things around here," she began, but her words were drowned out by the chorus of voices chanting, "No more tyranny, no more abuse." Officer Miller, who had previously backed my right to secure my property, now joined our ranks, standing as a reminder that the law was on our side. His calm, authoritative voice resonated through the crowd. "Let it be known, when individual rights are trampled by overreach, justice will prevail." His words underscored the very foundation of our movement: truth, legality, and the strength of unity. The tension reached its peak as Karen's gaze darted nervously across the sea of determined residents. For a moment, it was as if time itself stood still. Then, with a final, defeated sigh, Karen's face fell. The HOA board, now under immense public pressure and armed with undeniable evidence of her misconduct, announced that her authority was revoked effective immediately. Apologies would be issued to those wronged, and new, fairer guidelines would be put into place. Karen's reign had finally come to an end. As the crowd erupted in cheers and heartfelt applause, I stepped forward once more to address my neighbors. "Today," I declared, my voice strong and clear, "we have shown that when we stand together, no force, no matter how entrenched, can silence our voices or trample our rights. This isn't just a victory for my property or even our neighborhood. It's a victory for every person who believes in fairness and the right to live without intimidation." I paused, letting the significance of our collective triumph settle over us like a warm, reassuring blanket. Remember, change begins when we dare to question authority and stand up for what's right. Let this moment be a reminder that our community thrives on respect, freedom, and unity. We must always be ready to protect these values, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. The protest slowly gave way to celebration. Neighbors hugged, shared stories of past grievances, and made plans to continue working together to ensure our community remained a place of justice and freedom. That day, as I later reviewed the footage and listened to the voices of my fellow residents, I knew our struggle had been more than a single battle. It was a turning point in how our neighborhood would be governed. If you believe in the power of community and the importance of standing up for your rights, remember that even the smallest act of defiance can spark monumental change. Our story is a testament to the fact that unity and determination can overcome even the most oppressive forces. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and always fight for your freedom. And if you found this story inspiring, please subscribe to our channel and give us a like to show your support. Together, we can create a world where every voice is heard.